once you get that water under the paper,
It's,
I
yeah,
just
it,
yeah,
it starts falling apart, and it's
it
disappointing.
does.
You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I really
Well,
like this plane. I want to
yeah.
fly it more.
Well, I decided, I was going to, like ground the plane because all the paper, and I thought
Yeah.
I'm just going to fly this into the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Why not?
Why
Right?
not? I mean, what have I got to lose?
All right. Welcome back to Aviation podcast. You are here with me, your host, Matt Allen. This is episode 98, Waterfowl, with my special guest, Richard Joy. Today, North Carolina is on the cusp of about 3 days of solid rain, as we have the remnants of, Hurricane Debbie, I believe, is rolling across the Carolinas, and it is just hanging out. And it's going to hang out for a while. So I'm about to have a lot of lakes locally. And so it got me thinking, Richard Joy, who is part of our community on Discord and a longtime listener, good friend, and I got a chance to hang with him at Flight Fest last year. He has been very active in starting up, getting involved in the float flying aspect of the hobby. And so I thought, what a perfect person to talk to about what I need to get prepared for when I build my plane to go fly off my local little ditch lakes that are going to be popping up in the next couple of days here. Welcome, Richard, to the podcast again.
Yeah, hey Matt. Great to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you jumping on with us and talking about this. I know we have an episode a little while ago that talked about some of these basic concepts, but the difference is I'd only flown once again, or maybe twice off of a puddle. So I've experienced some of these things a little tiny bit. But you've had a lot more experience as of the recent history here. And you've really done, I think you've approached it in a far less haphazard manner than I did. So I'm really excited to hear what you did. I want you to talk to everybody about what you've done and how you got to where you're finding success. And it seems like you're really enjoying it. And things that things that you may have learned along the way, things you'd recommend, as well as, I don't know, just learn a little bit more about like the things I thought would work. I don't know how do they work, because you have put together some of the things that I was thinking, I should probably do that if I keep doing these float flies. But anyway, and if you didn't know, Richard, if you can't tell by his accent, he is a Brit, but he is currently residing in California. So don't hold that against him. No, honestly, he's a good bloke, and I appreciate it. All right. So why don't we, as with our podcast, what Joe and I typically like to do is start off with what we've been doing in the hobby for the last couple of weeks. Why don't you tell us what you've been up to in the last couple of weeks? I know it's been middle summer, it's early August, and it's nothing but hot. So how have you managed to get out and fly?
Well, like you said, this year is my first year at flying planes off of water. Last year, I got into EDFs with the Ben Harper's F-16. I built that.
They fly so nice. I mean, looking at that squadron at Flight Fest, you're like, I need to get me one of those. I need to build one of those.
Yeah. Well,
is that what inspired you with that?
Well, I didn't go for the F-18 because that's two EDFs. I figured I'd start off with an F-16 just to have the 16. But that flew really well last year. Yeah. So I thought this year I need to get into another part of the hobby. And it turned out that some of the club members at my AMA club, they go down to this lake, local lake, really nice. It's pretty close. In fact, it's closer to me than the club.
Okay.
So
Is it is it like miles long kind of deal, or is it football fields across, or what kind of
well,
size lake are we talking about?
yeah, it's a big. In fact, it's the location is Folsom Dam. So you've got
Oh,
the
okay.
you've got the dam
Okay.
down this way down the river, and so obviously the dam lets out a certain amount of water, and that fills up, and then you've got on the other side you've got a hatchery where they have salmon,
Oh,
during
okay.
the winter
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And
Okay,
there's
yeah.
a
No,
whole,
it's
yeah, I mean, it's a big aqua center. There's people, doing paddle boarding, kayaking, swimming.
oh yeah.
There's a school there for learning how to sail a boat. And so it's a really nice area. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to get there early because otherwise it starts to get pretty busy, especially during the summertime. But it's a very, very pleasant area, and it's big, so you don't have to worry about, having space to land or take off or anything.
Okay.
So you have plenty of room.
Excellent.
And yeah, and also like especially with the heat that we've had here in California, which we have every year anyway.
Yeah, but
Um,
what has it been getting up to? I know in
um,
out here it's been over the hundreds, and it feels like 10 degrees hotter at least on every day.
well,
That's
yeah. I
that's
mean,
hot here.
the air here is pretty dry, so it's not like
Yeah.
high humidity, but I mean, it's we've had 111-degree temperatures, and it's not so much we've had them, like just 1 or 2 days. It's been almost 3 or 4 weeks now, every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So going to the my local AMA club, is it's in the middle of nowhere sort of thing, and it gets hot, and so it's been so much pleasant to fly off, next to a lake
Yeah, right?
because there's trees. It's nice and cool. There's sometimes a bit of a breeze,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
also it's attracted a lot of attention. There's probably about I would say on average maybe about 7 or 8 people go down there flying, and so
Okay.
we take over the picnic tables for benches, and
Alright.
and then you know you, kids will come by and look at the airplanes, and people, joggers and cyclists will come by and ask us about, about the planes. And it's,
Awesome.
attracted, I think, some interest in the hobby, unlike when you're at the club, you don't get that
Y
sort of traffic.
Yeah, I
Mm,
kinda wish, I wish we could somehow make AMA fields more visible.
mhm.
Most of the time, they're kinda stuck out and as far away as you can get from humanity. I mean,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
usually for kinda good reason. I mean, if we're doing that kinda stuff, we want to make sure that we're safe while we're doing what we're doing. I fly at a giant field, as I've said many times before. So when you've got a giant scale plane go down, last thing you want is it to be near a bunch of people, possibly endangering them if you're, out over whatever, like
Y-
if it's in the middle of a park, right? Like that'd be the worst case scenario, right? That you can
Right.
imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the only time that we really have anybody from the public at the club is during events. We'll have
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
warbirds event. We have a jet event, and
And you put a
yeah,
press releases to invite the public down.
yeah, yeah. So and it's typically free for the public, and,
Yeah.
and that does attract quite a few people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, which is good. That's
yeah,
always good. But yeah, you doing that kind of on a regular basis, amidst the public is, I feel like that's something that's missing. That's making this hobby harder to get on board with.
mhm,
Is that you don't see it. So kids who didn't even know it was possible, what I mean? When you see that and you got adults or kids who are like, "Whoa, I forgot how good, how much fun that looked. So I want
yeah,
to try that. I forgot." And then you go
uh, yeah,
obviously talk to you guys and get a good kind of handle as to what it might take and see if it's worth getting in. Plus, they hey, come on next week. We'll be out here, and if you're going to be here, here's my number. Let me know, and I'll bring the buddy box or whatever, and you'll fly off the water too. Or
uh,
whatever it is, right? Like it's easy enough to get somebody involved if you know where they're going to be.
well, see, the other thing, our club provides free lessons, buddy box lessons.
Hmm.
Um, every Wednesday afternoon. So that's free. Anybody can
That's great.
book. There's a on our website. You can just book a time, book a time slot, and one of the instructors. I think we have about 6 or 7 instructors, and they will take kids or adults,
Yeah.
and just get a taste of flying.
So, if you don't mind me asking, if you want to promote your club, go ahead and tell us what your name of your club is, and if you're listening, if you have to listen in there in that area, you can at least go to the website.
Yeah, it's Amos, AMOS,
Okay.
RC.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the I can't remember what it stands for now, but it's something like I know S is for Sacramento.
Oh, okay.
And A is for aviation, I think. And M's modeling.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, just go to the website, amosrc.com. And it's a pretty pretty decent website now.
Associated Modelers of Sacramento.
That's it.
Yeah. We'll put a link.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
somebody's interested, they can go and
and
get a handle. Now, and honestly, if you're listening and go like, "Oh, I wish my club did that," your club might. If you're, just reach out to your local club and see if they do that kind of thing.
Well, actually, one of the new things that our club started is to have a section of the club that's only for young members. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because typically, these clubs are a bunch of us old guys, flying planes.
Yeah,
I
you mean
might be
experienced or age wise?
I might be one of the younger ones,
right?
But in order to attract the younger people, then what our president has done, he's kind of make a subsection of our club.
Okay.
And it's just for kids that I think they're 18 or under, something like that. Maybe you can be older, but it's basically is to attract more younger people to the hobby.
Excellent. Yeah.
And they have a special discount for membership. They have their own events. They're basically they're running like a mini club inside our club,
Okay.
but just amongst themselves, type of thing, with some support from the more senior members of the club.
Yeah, the more experienced guys who you can say, "Oh, let me help you get that going."
Yeah, and that stuff's all on the website, so
that's good. Good. Sounds like you have a very active club.
Yeah.
I know our Piedmont Air Modelers in North Carolina here. We definitely have the same kind of deal where we have a trainer. We have somebody who'll do a training program. I know there's a number of trainers available. I know we kind of like sign up to be like, hey, if somebody comes in, we want to be on a list of guys to call, and it's like, yeah, sure. Or no, I'm not going to have that kind of time. I wish I did, but yeah, most AMA sanctioned airfields will have something like that too. So good. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And so basically, when we're at the lake, we do promote our club. So and pretty much, I'm pretty sure all the people that are flying at the lake, they're all members of the Amos club. And so, what we do, we'll explain it. If somebody comes up from the public, we'll just say that, go to that website, if you're interested in flying, and because it's probably better to fly off ground first before you fly off of water. Speaking from experience.
I think so too. You should talk to your club about possibly getting a temporary sign. That way, when you go, you can set up like a sign behind what you're doing, and then or cards to hand out.
Right.
But yeah, the website's a great go-to. So, what do you fly when you're out there? Well, what have you been flying in the last couple of weeks?
The last couple of weeks, I've flown several planes. I've flown the Sea Duck, the FT Sea Duck. I've flown the Tudor, the FT Tudor. Okay. So the FT Tudor, if you look at the plans, they come with floats. It has floats, but it's actually the floats that were designed for the Cub, the FT Simple Cub.
Yep.
Same floats.
I remember. Yeah, same floats. I think they only ever designed one. What do you feel about those?
The plane didn't actually leave the water. The FT Tudor, I had a lot of trouble with that. with the
Okay.
cub floats on. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Do you
um,
think it's a matter of the size of the floats or the weight of the tutor or combination thereof, or is it just like you haven't got the hang of it yet?
no, it was. I think it's the trouble with the tutor is that the back of the fuselage kind of goes down, go, slopes down rather than going straight across.
Okay.
So as you're moving across the water, it's very easy for the tail to dip into the water. Okay.
Okay.
The other thing I've noticed is that the it creates a wave. So the floats create a wave,
Right.
a bow wave. Okay, and that is so high that the propeller hits it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
And
you
of
hit.
course, the propellers are made to go through air, not water. And
No.
every time I've ever seen one hit water, it
Mhm.
almost stops.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. So
you know.
you can. I wondered what the noise was because I would I'd be building up speed, and then
Yep.
suddenly I hear this tuk, 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 and the thing would be sort of wobbling,
Right.
and then after we took some video and sort of analyzed it, and sure enough, the propeller is hitting the wave that's coming off the floats, and then so the thrust is being reduced, and so you never get enough thrust to get off the water.
What do
Okay.
you think? What do you think about putting, in most of floats or float boat planes, basically,
Mhm.
the bottom of the boat kind of has a point at which there's a rim. It's a very
Yeah.
small rim, but it deflects the water straight out, and it
Hmm.
keeps it from coming up the side and kind of coming up too high. I was wondering if you talked about like possibly putting like a plastic card or something like that, where you just glue on a rim, kind of just around, I don't know, wherever the water, a little bit above the water line, right?
Yeah, I think it could be the design of the because I think it was Peter that designed those
Yeah,
floats. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
think so. It's just,
They've been back. He did that years ago,
oh,
and
geez, yeah.
I mean they have a step because it's important to have
Yeah,
the
this
step.
this step
Yeah,
is, yeah, no, they have a step. I'm talking about more like a, we'll call it a wave deflector. It
yeah,
kind of, like
like
as
a
it comes up and out,
mm,
it's a horizontal piece almost. And then it,
okay,
it
yeah,
allows the wave to deflect further outward and not up.
right,
It keeps it from going too high.
too
Right,
high,
because I've
yeah,
I've noticed the same thing with some of the floats, some of the
mm,
planes that I was flying. I was flying the Sea Angel, which is it's an anime plane, but it's essentially, it's modeled after a real plane. It's basically a big
mm.
boat plane with a high front mounted or wing top pod, right?
Oh
That
yeah, I
pulls
know
it
what you mean.
along,
Yeah,
right? And so that boat on the bottom, the actual one has that little rim. Now, because the motor's mounted straight above the pontoon, it's not an issue. But I imagine if I had any side mounted propellers, if I put in a
mm,
twin, it wouldn't be okay. Like I would have to do
mm,
some sort of deflector or something. So
mm.
I wonder if that might help you. It might even help with the sea duct too. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, the sea duct is okay. I can the sea duct takes off on water fine, and it flies really well. Um,
Nice.
this is just this was the FT Tudor that I
Yeah.
was having
Yeah.
trouble because like I said, what was happening is as I got faster and faster, it started
Yeah.
to vibrate almost, because of the propeller hitting the water. And you may be right. Because the shape of those pontoons or those floats, it's just flat on the bottom. There's no
Right.
shape. There's no boat shape um, to the
Right.
floats.
You almost
Um,
want to make too many um uh oh my god, one of the hull of the sea duck. Two
yeah,
little mini.
yeah. And I've noticed so I'm currently building the Clips-on Model BXL, and that's got floats. And because it's a 3D printed plane, they're able to make a much more um, you know, a boat-like float, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
So it's kind of almost V-shaped on the bottom. It's
Okay. Yep.
so I think it would deflect the water much better than having just a flat float bottom.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be worth
Mm,
worth building a new set and just seeing how that works. Nice.
mm. Yeah.
Do you have anything other than those
Yeah. So the three, I've basically flown 3 planes in the last few weeks. So it's the
Mhm.
so the Sea Duck that
Yep.
apart from we can maybe talk about that later is the foam board not doing too well with the actual
Yeah,
exposure to water.
we'll cover that, I promise.
Yeah.
Mm.
But the Sea Duck
See the
flies really well.
scooter.
Once I can get off off the water, it
Yeah,
flies. It's very very slow. It flies really. It's really really docile plane.
nice.
And
I've got my kid over here.
yeah. Oh, you have the speed build kit?
Yeah, 'cause I've got like 4 stacked
Yeah,
up
no,
over there.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
fit
yeah.
so but yeah,
No,
we've got
it's got a couple of C motor, yeah,
mhm.
C motors in it, and yeah, it's really. I mean, the comment I had on Friday was when I was flying it. Somebody said that your plane flies on rails. It's so solid, you know. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's
but
what you want too, right? You want it to
yeah,
be predictable and,
and I mean, there are, like I said, there are people coming in. You have to. Usually, we have a spotter to make sure that
yep.
somebody's not coming up in a canoe or in a kayak or something. Because
Yeah,
you are effectively sometimes flying over people, and
different hazards, but, it's
yeah,
the same kinda
yeah,
deal.
yeah. And then
Real
suddenly they'll have one of those row, those team of rowers, in those boats with
Yeah, yep.
all the rowers, and they travel fast, and they can
Yeah,
suddenly,
they go s
yeah, yeah, yeah.
at a good clip.
So you have to be aware of those. But yeah, the only other plane I did try out just one time was the 3D Lab Prints Cub. They have a 3D printed
Okay.
Cub, and that has an option for floats.
Yeah,
And
I saw yours. It looks really good.
yeah, no, the only complaint I have about that plane is it's very small, and it's not so much being small. It's actually not that small. I think it may be about a 40-inch wingspan, so
Okay.
it's not that
Yeah, it's a
small.
good park park
But
flyer stuff.
yeah, there's no space, to put stuff. It's really
Okay.
crowded. You can't get access to the fuselage from the wing. It's just the front bit. Is so I'm hoping that the replacement for that will be the Eclipse on model BXL, because that is
Okay.
a pretty large plane, and I mean the floats are about 2 foot, yeah,
Yeah,
2 feet long. Yeah, yeah,
two and a
yeah,
half. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so I've been basically, yeah, just flying those planes
Mostly off the water then, huh? Nice.
only off the water. Yeah, yeah.
Look at you.
I haven't
L-
been to the AMA club probably
Land-based stuff. Who needs that anymore?
um, for probably 2 months now because of the
Now,
heat. Yeah,
I
just
feel
mainly because
like
of the heat. Yeah,
you've got the appropriate beard. So my thought is you need a cap and a pipe.
pipe.
I can't tell you how many times have you looked at those old outer zone pictures and it's some like 1930s or 40s flyer and it's a picture of a guy with the fire and of course he's got a pipe just hanging out of
Yeah,
his mouth. Pretty as you please.
I'll have to take that up.
I know, right? No, I don't want you to start smoking, but it would be fun. Funny. It's just I feel like that's what a boat captain does. He's got a pipe.
Well, talking of boats, I have
Okay.
been um, I have been rescuing planes.
Okay.
So one of the things I did before I got into the float flying was I decided that I had to have a rescue boat. I
Okay.
didn't know, mainly because I didn't know how well I was going to do, and I figured, well, the main thing is, if you're stuck out, it's not so bad if you crash or
Yeah.
you lose power when you're on the ground. You can go over and walk over and get it, but it's not so easy when it's in the middle of the lake. So
No.
yeah, and so I thought, well, there has to be. I have to have a method of recovery of my plane. And I looked on. There's some boats that were, there's loads of YouTube videos out there, and I think the one I picked, I think the guy's called Andrew. No, I think his last name is Newton.
Yeah,
And
Andrew Newton.
Andrew Newton,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's Australian. He's
Mhm.
and I based my design
I think it's
based
Perth
on
Amboy is where he's out of or that area, but
Yeah, yeah. And so I based the design on his because what he'd done is basically just built it out of PVC piping
Yep.
with pool noodles, strapped
Yep.
to the side. So a little
Right.
bit like like a catamaran.
Right.
And
And
then just have PVC piping going across. The only difference I did, sort of improvement from his design, is all the motor mounts and the battery container and the receiver and everything. I 3D printed those.
okay.
He used I think he just used like plastic,
Yeah.
food
I think
boxes and stuff.
I think he had a Ziploc container or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
so and then
Something
he
real
just
cheap and easy.
yeah, yeah. So and I think he put some plywood out there. But so what I did, I made it all 3D printed, and I even ordered a flashing light from Amazon.
Oh, okay. That
So
way other people can see it too.
so
Nice.
it was just, and I probably should put some sort of siren on there as well. But um,
You should get the Ghostbuster siren sound.
yeah, yeah. But no, no, it's proven pretty useful because I've actually, I'm not actually had to rescue my boat yet, my planes yet, but I have had to rescue
Nice.
several others.
Nice. Well,
Um,
I'm glad it's proving useful.
and yeah, yeah,
Um, I can't wait to talk a little bit more because we do have
mm,
we'll have a picture to share. If nothing, it'll hopefully be in the YouTube video. But I know you shared a picture with me, so we can talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm so glad to hear it. So you're boating as well as plane.
yeah, and it's actually
Pilot.
pretty good. It's actually turned out to be pretty good fun, rescuing. Uh, this because it's got reverse on it.
Yeah.
It's got some differential
Okay.
ESCs, and if you open up the throttle, it goes pretty fast.
Oh,
And
does it?
yeah, it's really quite fast. So it's got just two propellers on the back, differential thrust for steering,
So do you
and
just sort of push it back to shore? Whatever you kind of
yes,
encapsulate it and
yeah,
push it?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I just get behind the plane and then just sort of keep nudging it back slowly,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I don't want to push it back. I mean, I go out to the plane
Yeah.
fast, but then I slowly push it back,
Mm, nice.
try to avoid damaging the plane, with the propellers on the back of the boat.
Yeah.
But
That'd be
um,
sad. I got your
yeah,
plane. It's in pieces now.
yeah.
Sorry.
But
That's funny.
but yeah, so
Okay.
that's added. That's actually added to the fun of. And
Yeah.
when I turned up one morning there, one of the guys said, "Oh, I'm so glad the rescue boat is here. I you know feel a bit more
Yeah.
confident."
Yeah, you definitely need to get like a little red and yellow or whatever, some the
Yeah,
emergency, like whatever the Coast Guard would use.
yeah, yeah.
That'd be fun.
Well, I got this. It's a flashing light. It's self-contained. It's got a
Oh yeah.
USB charger in it, and
Okay.
it's mainly used for, like, when if you break down on
Yeah.
the highway or something. It's $20 or something.
You
It,
put it what
but
on the top of the little pod mount, the
yeah,
little
yeah,
bin.
I did a 3D printed
Oh my god, that's
mount for it. Yeah, yeah. So,
awesome.
um, but
Oh
yeah,
man.
so that's been quite interesting, part of this part of the hobby. Yeah.
Nice. Sounds good.
But yeah, so the only planes, I think, yeah, because the only I don't, obviously you have, I think my number of planes now is 22, but I've only really started to build some of these float planes. So
Okay.
that's the reason why I built this Sea Duck, is that it was, it's, unlike a float plane, it has the twin engines on it, so it's easy to maneuver in
Right.
the water.
Yeah, I think they chose that one as probably one of the earlier float planes that they had was because of that.
Yeah.
But okay, well good. Um why don't I just go through mine really quick? It's about three different things. I ended up getting out to the field the other weekend, and I've been working on kind of I don't know about secret project, but I've been kind of working on a project. And it's effectively it's a GLH2 is kind of what it's modeled after. It's a little different, but it's very similar. And made it out of foam board because that's the materials I have on hand. And I also wanted to make it cheap and accessible. and the design of that plane is to go fast, right? Like its whole goal is to go very, very, very fast. And I thought I bought a motor that would make it go fast, and I think I missed the mark. I'm not really sure, but it did get it to fly. It was very touchy, but I did have success flying it around. I did a number of loops, circuits around the field. Did a little bit of acrobatics, but again, it was. I think I had it set really close to the balance point because it I moved the battery up a bit and it started flying a little bit better. It was better behaved, but it was not the. I was really hoping it would fly on rails and just be like crazy, and it was good. It flew fast. It's definitely slippery. I enjoyed it, and I'll see if I can't put together. I know we filmed it, so I'm hoping that I can get that video up and share it with everybody. But the idea of that project is, go really fast for very little money. Very similar kind of homage to what got me into the hobby from Flight Fest. And remember the $100 100 miles an hour for $100?
Hmm.
That was the plane. That was the one that made me like, okay, if that's really true, I can get into this hobby.
Mhm.
So I figured I'd see what I could do with that. So
It's not EDF though, is it?
no. It's just a
Mm.
single I think it's an 18. What's the motor? There's a motor, but it's like 4,300 kV. Like it goes
Oh,
stupid
okay.
fast.
Yeah,
Like it,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'm kind of playing around with what that can do and what it can't. I haven't tried. I have not. I only put a really small battery in it, and it was really windy that day, and so it weighs. I forgot to weigh it. Shoot, mental note: need to weigh it. It's really light, so it got pushed around by the wind quite a bit. So the fact that I was able to bring it home at all was a happy thing.
Mhm.
But I wanted to try it on 4S, and see what it'll do on a lot more oomph, maybe a little bit more weight. Usually when it's light, it flies really good, but I think with this a little, especially with the wind, having a heavier battery might have been the smarter choice on that. But again, it was a maiden. I just want to see how it went, and I'm glad I flew it and it came back in one piece, which was nice
It's the
because
main
that didn't
thing.
happen. Yeah,
Mhm.
well, yeah. With maidens, you just never really know. You hope, you pray, but who knows? The next one I ended up flying was the 10-minute plane. Jesse is listening in, and I ended up building his 10-minute plane that he left here because I think when he was talking on the last podcast, that last episode, he's like, I made a couple, and I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I'll build that one, maybe I won't. So I ended up taking it and building it, and I got it tuned in a bit this past time, and of course it was really windy, so uh, it was an adventure getting it tuned in, but I think I'm pretty close. So I'm at this point. I was able to get it to get a thermal, which was pretty fun. So that didn't it was pretty neat to kind of catch the front edge of something and see it just start to lift. And it probably climbed about 75 or 100 feet before I think the pocket of lift moved behind the flight line. So I was like, I shouldn't. I brought it out of the pocket of lift and then kind of, but that means that I should be able to, um, I should be able to put the lights on it like he had it, so I could fly at night and fly a little bit later into the evening. Because sooner or later it's going to start getting dark real quick, um, and so I don't want to do that. Or I want to make sure that. But it came back in one piece. It did have a pretty rough landing at the end there, which I don't know quite what happened. I'm still trying to figure that out. When I picked it up, everything was in working order. Everything seemed to be moving fine. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more detail. It's been one of those the weeks that go like everything's great, and it's like, oh, I got 2 hours, I can go run out and do the thing, and I enjoy it, and then I come back and I'm like, oh, we have to run to do the next thing. So I haven't really dove back into that. And last but not least, if you remember, I was talking about building we'll call it, what is it, half size or third size aircraft carrier, airborne aircraft carrier, which is like 8 feet or 6 feet by, I don't know, 6 feet or something. It's huge. So I decided, that didn't really fly. I didn't get a chance to get it to fly. Also, maybe I should build a park flyer size. And so I built that the last weekend, and I took it out, and I was able to fly it a little bit, but it had some weird tendencies. It could have been the wind. So I think I'm going to do some repairs and see if I can't try it again. I have to set the motors a little bit further apart because the wingtips on the propeller were like just touching. So every once in a while, it kind of make this tinky noise, tink 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 tink, as the tips would touch as the motor spun. I was also trying to do the Prandtl twist, have the outer segment to be like a -2 incident angle. I know that's not exactly the Prandtl twist, but it's the aspect of the Prandtl twist that I'm looking for, which is to basically fly flat and level with just a slight bank to do a natural coordinated turn, where I'm not having to use any rudder or anything like that. Just kind of bank it a little bit and have it do gentle circles, because that's kind of the goal of that plane. So I was able to give it a try. It wasn't really successful, which is disappointing, but I have 2 wings and a fuselage that's repairable, to give it another try pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to getting that. So yeah, that's about all I flew this past week. I've got other projects. I was working on the Quack Quack, the Air Pirates Quack Quack from Flight Test Forums, and it's basically like a 24-inch mini sea duck. It's adorable, and I've been wanting to build it forever.
I'll have to build one of those and take it to the lake.
Yeah. And so I think the original one only needed one motor. It only needed like one quadcopter racer motor, like a 2205, 2300 kV with a 5-inch prop kind of deal. But I think he's adjusted it. Some guys fly it with like a twin Speedy Bee. If you know what the Speedy Bee is, where basically you take 2 of those setups and run it on 4S, so it just goes like crazy. So they're running that little Quack with 2 racer motors from a quadcopter. A little absurd to me, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for the kind of thing I like to do. So I'm in the middle of building that because, again, it's raining, and if I can get that to fly off one of the puddles in the front yard, it'll make me stupid happy. Or I can go to a park like I should, or maybe the flying field where they'll have a big rut and a nice sized puddle, or there's a lake in the very back. I could give a try. There's like a quarry lake in the very back, so I can. And I've talked to some of the members, and they're like, "Oh yeah, if you want to go back there, just don't go after it." Like that goes deep. Like if it sinks, you're not getting it. And we don't want you to go in there, because if you sink, you may not come back. It's really deep. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, good to know. But go ahead and fly off of it. Yeah,
you need a recovery boat.
That's what I need. Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's why don't we let's talk about a quick history of some of the earliest RC float planes that were used as UASs, and then we'll go right into that. We'll talk about the rescue boat that you built. All right. So this history is about the radio controlled Fairy Queen, which is FAIREY. Very similar to the name of I think there was a company. So I'm not really sure if that's what that was kind of based off of, but it was developed in 1931 by Britain's Royal Air Force establishment based on the Fairy 3. So that's the main, Fairy 3F float plane. And essentially it's like a World War II, World War I biplane with floats on it. 3 were ever built, and they were devised to be used for military target practice. Following preliminary trials in 1931, first craft was taken onto the Lee on Solent in Gosport, Hampshire, UK, where it was trialed from aboard the HMS Valiant on 30th of June, 1932. It crashed within seconds, owing to the autopilot's gyros toppling under the acceleration forces of the launch, right? Because you're basically going from 0 to 60 in about 100 feet, right? That's usually what the catapults do. A second aircraft was tested on the 19th of April, but again, it crashed with about 30 seconds within its launch because of a malfunctioning of the rudder controls. The third and final Fairy Queen was launched on the 14th of September, so that's much later, in 1932, and completed a successful flight. Furthermore, it was able to land in the rough seas in January 1933, and it was finally used for target practice in a home fleet firing trial exercise. The ships in the fleet fired at the aircraft for 2 hours without hitting it, and the craft was returned without damage. If you believe that. Um, in 1933, it was brought down by one of the guns of the HMS Shropshire. So that's His Majesty's ship, Shropshire, while being used with the Mediterranean fleet. Further pilotless aircraft were developed under the name Queen Bee, which is basically it's a less expensive, um, based on the less expensive de Havilland Tiger Moth. So they kind of took a Tiger Moth, put floats on it, and put the gyro and radio control system in it, so that they could fly that around. So that way they could have the ships use it for target practice. You got to learn how to shoot the guns and hit things some way, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
it is amazing that they had control on these planes, or maybe they didn't have too much control.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like they did. I mean, they were able to use the radio control to be able to get it to
Yeah,
fly around once they figured out what was going on with the gyro, and probably strengthen a number of the surfaces that normally you don't have to worry about it, right? Um,
yeah. I
normally,
mean, just like having the number of channels and that to control the plane.
right?
Because I mean, I mean, the early RC transmitters were very simple, just single channel.
Yeah, they were single
So,
channel and they had an
mm,
escapement like an old clock,
yeah, yeah.
and you'd hit the button the number of times based on what control surface you wanted to actually actuate. I think
Yeah, so maybe they used a similar mechanism.
they might have.
Mhm.
Either way, it's an impressive feat for sure, and it certainly led to advancements in naval practice and preparedness. And they've been used ever since. Matter of fact, I visited. Um, I was on a work trip in Boise a little while back, and ended up visiting the local aircraft museum. I think it's a Warhawks Air Museum. It's fantastic. You can see most of the stuff online. It's almost all available. There's like 360 views all over the place. There is a whole section based on RC target practice aircraft. They would fly around just so that people could get practice being, you know, operating their equipment. So rather than being, a mile out or half mile out or however far they fly those a little bit closer because they're smaller, but it's still the same kind of operation. So still really useful. It's interesting how RC gets used, and how it's been kind of an integral piece to aircraft and warfare since early times. So nice. And I mean, anything else you want to add? Anything you know about that I didn't cover? I guess.
No, I mean, I'm from that country, but I wasn't aware of that particular plane. I mean, I know that obviously the Tiger Moth is
Right.
pretty well known, but
Yeah,
the
the Fairy 3.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. Go look up the that was an early manufacturer of biplanes, and they made a handful of other World War II aircraft that were fairly successful, but I don't think they really had too many that were like knockout aircraft. Similar, like
yeah,
they didn't have one that was. I'm trying to think of some of the very famous. My brain is blanking on all the really famous UK World War II fighters. I know there's plenty of them too.
World War Two or
Yeah, World
one.
War II. World War II.
Um,
I'm just trying to think of the more modern era where people would like tend to see a ferry, and I'm blanking. I'm awful. Uh,
no, I Yeah,
The
I can't think of one.
swordfish is one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one where that's an early war biplane, I believe. Most of the stuff was
Swordfish, yeah, I do recall the
it's a
swordfish. Yeah. Mm.
torpedo bomber.
Yes.
They had a couple others, and I think that was probably their most successful. It seems, but there's others, and they've been they've been doing business. They had done business for a long while, but anyway, we can hop off of that. Let's talk about something a little bit more important. I want to know. So, what did you do? I'm sorry, I'm seeing your picture, and I see the little rotating yellow light on the top of your thing. So tell us about this rescue aircraft. What made you choose this design over other designs? Like, what other designs did you see? Why did you choose? Like, I need to get a rescue aircraft. Why was that your first choice?
Well, I just not having flown from water, I just figured that you have to have some sort of rescue device. I mean, some people. I talked to some members of the club, and I said, what rescue device do you? And somebody said, well, they have an inflatable kayak, so they
Okay.
can take that down. But it's obviously that's quite a bit of cargo for the plane for the car.
Yeah.
And then you got to pump it up and everything. And then I just did some googling on some searches on YouTube, and there was a number of designs out there, and I just picked on Andrew's design because I think it's because it was just simple. It was really simple. Now, the decision I had to make was the propulsion. So, do I have to?
Yeah.
The two choices were either have differential thrust, so have twin motors. So it's a basically what would be on the back, like an airboat, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just used a couple of old motors and did that, and then used differential thrust for, turning the boat. The other alternative I did look into, and I actually got the servo for it, is having just a single motor, but having a servo that moves that motor, left and right.
Oh, okay. Different directional thrust.
There's a motor you can get on Amazon. It's a servo you can get. It's quite a large servo because you're not worried about size, and it actually has a bracket on it to mount a motor. So
wow.
Yeah, and so it's already so basically all you have to do is mount the servo on something, and that could be a 3D printed mount or something, and then and I did think about I even bought the servo. And so I have it, as an alternative. Yeah. So I didn't know which one would work. And then in Andrew's design, he actually had a third motor. Okay. So he had two motors that would propel the boat forward, but then he had a single prop and motor on the other side to push it backwards. So for reverse. So that's three motors. And I thought, and I started to build it that way, and then it, there's three ESCs, and it just starts to get a little bit. The wiring starts to get complicated. So in the end, I kept the two motors, but I ended up ordering differential ESCs.
Okay.
And so the way I have it set up on the transmitter is it's basically like a car, like a ground vehicle. I actually have the throttle on the right side of the transmitter.
Yep.
Okay. So basically where your elevator would be.
Push it up to go forward.
And pull it back to go backwards.
Right, and then left and right gives the differential steering.
Well, I use the rudder stick still for left and right turning. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't sure exactly how to set it up, and but it actually does having because obviously the right stick is centered, so that's when it's stopped, and then you're just pushing forward and backwards.
Yeah.
Again, like you would do an RC car.
Yeah. And when I do an RC car with the traditional airplane transmitter, I'll just set all the controls on the right side. That way they all center.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I could have done it that way as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I do it all on the left stick. right?
Yeah.
I use the
Yeah.
rudder for left and right, and then I just leave the throttle. That way it can just keep trucking.
Yeah.
But the problem is doing reverse. You have to put I have to have a button or
Yeah.
use one of the
Yeah. Yeah.
switches. So
Yeah. I think
right.
initially I thought about using like a reverse button, and
Yeah.
but it's actually much better just to have the forward and on the one stick.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And
Yeah, I
so
think that's what I tended to come
mm,
to
yeah.
was having it on the right side because then
Yeah.
you could go back.
And so
Yeah, good
I
idea.
can I can forward, and of course being able to reverse the boat breaks pretty quickly. I mean the motors complain, they screech,
Yeah,
but because just suddenly reversing the motors, I'm not sure how long they're going to last. But
right.
yeah, that's the one. That's the seaplane rescue boat.
Yeah, and he did a follow-up
Mm,
improvements video where
yeah.
he went through and was like, "Well, I've done it differently since then." It's pretty close.
Mhm.
I noticed
Yeah, I
he
mean,
has a snap lid. How do you keep yours watertight? Or what do you waterproof on that? Maybe that's a better way to put
no,
it.
no, no, no. In fact, what the difference, I guess the slight improvement I made over Andrew's design. I mean, it's basically the same design, but I 3D printed the motor mounts.
Okay.
I actually designed in Fusion 360 some motor mounts that I can screw on,
Okay.
and then I made some little boxes for the 3D printed
Yeah.
boxes with lids on, which pretty much seals. It's a tight lid, and then
Right.
I bought a battery strap around them just to keep the lid on. So the ESCs, the receiver, and the battery and everything is in these two little boxes. So
Nice.
there's very very little exposed wire, just really going out of the box into the
Okay.
motor. And
Yeah, and so the little bit of splashing isn't gonna be a big deal.
because I mean that's at the back, so it's raised up fairly high, so
Yeah.
you don't really get too much water in that area. Yeah.
So I see you have one front bar that's low, and the propeller bar, I'll call it, is higher, almost like
Yes.
twice the height. Is there a reason why you set it up like that? I know Andrew Newton seems to be all one height, is what it looks like.
No, I think it was just the pieces of PVC I had cut to lengths on something else. I think I dismantled my plane rack, and I used some of the PVC piping that I used for the plane rack, and I just
Okay.
happened to have some lengths that
Yeah.
but there was no real reason. Um, but it is, but I am thinking about putting a bar at the front because
Okay.
it's kind of tricky to to get to hook the plane. If you're rescuing a plane, it's tricky to get the plane pushed along with the two side pieces. So I'm thinking about putting a bar across there, and I'm also thinking about putting a net underneath because I last Friday I had to I rescued somebody's plane, but the canopy fell off. So I got the plane back, but the canopy was still out in the water.
Oh
And
no.
you could only just see the canopy, and so obviously the guy wanted the canopy as well. So I had
Yeah.
put the boat out again, and but it was very difficult because the canopy being so small, just kept going through between the two pool noodles. So I needed a little bit of a net in there for small, rescuing small objects like that.
So you almost have to
Um,
have like a servo with like a small net that rotates down into the water.
yeah, yeah. I saw one. I saw one. There's another guy that did a really sophisticated design for a boat on YouTube, and he has like a
Sure.
forklift, acts like a forklift truck. I mean, yeah, forklift.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it picks it up out of the water.
Yeah, yeah. So he actually goes underneath the wings, and then lifts the whole plane out of the water. But that looks kind of a complex mechanism, and
Yeah.
I'm not really prepared to do that.
Okay.
I mean,
No, and I get it.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
usually what I do, like I said, I go fast out, then I bring the plane back very slowly. Just basically just nudge the plane back to shore.
Sure.
And
Okay.
but that's I've actually I think I've done more of that. I've spent more time with the boat than I have with the actual planes taking off the planes off water.
Have you considered? I think we talked briefly about FPV. Have you considered? I imagine it's easier to maneuver if you had an FPV on it.
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
maybe even make it worse.
Yeah, no, it would have been very useful to especially for this canopy rescue, to have FPV because it
Okay.
was quite a distance out,
Yeah.
and his plane, the plane that he tipped over, was really just a very small plane. It was only about 20 inches wingspan,
Oh, wow, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and
So all you're
so
seeing
yeah,
are the legs of the plane sticking up?
yeah, 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 and I didn't want to do more damage to his plane with my boat than the water had already done damage to. So,
Right, yeah.
um, But
Okay.
yeah, FPV would be a definite thing. I don't think I'm going to do
Look
the forklift truck, the forklift thing,
okay. Well,
thing.
look at the show chat. Maybe you do it like that. I sent you a link to
Oh
something
yeah, okay,
there. Okay, so well, good.
yeah.
What other things? So you have it in a? Is it a fancy Tupperware container? How do you have the two little containers? Where's the RX?
That's
Where,
inside one of these
it's
3D
in the
printed.
okay. It's
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
little container. Okay, good.
yeah, yeah.
All right. And then you didn't really. It's just a little tray. It almost looks like a soap dish.
Yeah, it's like exactly. I just designed it in Fusion, really
Yeah.
pretty easy.
Nice.
But it's got a fairly tight fitting lid, so it's pretty
Right.
waterproof. It's not exactly waterproof, but it's
No, but I
water.
mean, it's splash proof.
Yeah, yeah.
That's essentially all you need. Is you need to be splash
Mm.
proof. Right.
But
I mean, you haven't had it flip over or anything like that.
no,
Yeah, it looks like a pretty sturdy design.
yeah, and
Go check it out. We'll have a link to Andrew Newton's video that you used. If you have a video of yours running, I saw you do a test video of that. Look pretty
I did a test in the backyard. There's a pool, so I tested it
okay.
first in the pool to make sure it with the planes. I do the same thing with the planes. Make sure they actually float and not
Okay.
sink before I take it to the lake.
Right.
So, yeah,
Okay.
no, it works pretty well. And last Friday I had to rescue 3 planes. I mean, sometimes up there at the lake, no one crashes, and
You-
or perhaps one of the paddle boarders will rescue a plane, because they happen to be close by. But last Friday was busy. Yeah, I had three rescues,
nice.
one after the other. Yeah, yeah.
Now, do you have, you know, I guess the right to rib them a little bit as you go, and you're like, oh no, look at me, I'm gonna go rescue your plane.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it looks impressive, I think, when you go out fast, and the
Yeah.
lights flashing. Yes, I need to put some sound on it. I think I need to put a siren on there.
Yeah, my vote
Mm.
is get a sound of the ghost. I just watched
Yeah, yeah,
Ghostbusters.
yeah.
Get the
That's
Ghostbusters siren for the Ecto One
yeah.
and put that on there.
But, yeah,
That'd be
it's
fun. Cool.
yeah. I might even take up RC boats. Start. I mean, there's a lot of 3D. There's several 3D printed boat designs out there as well. That could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah.
I know. Just looking into the RC submarine thing. I
Mhm.
mean, you just kind of. I skimmed past not to be punny, but I skimmed past the whole boat genre, and I was like, "There's a whole world." I mean, it's a whole sailboats and things like that.
Mm.
I mean, you can
In fact,
really go
yeah,
deep in.
there was a big one of the local hobby shops here. Basically sponsored. Well, actually, they organised a thing called RC Fest. It was a huge, well, fairly big RC festival, and our club was there, doing the flying, and we had trainers and buddy boxes, and it was at the same lake, although a bit further down
Okay.
the river,
Right.
and it was just basically in the car, in the car parking area, and also it's where they launch boats into the lake, into the Folsom Lake.
Okay.
And so they had pretty much every aspect of RC. So I mean, the hobby shop sells planes and boats and cars, mainly cars. So they had, they had the trucks, the trucks that go over the, what's that called? Oh, crawlers.
Yeah, the crawlers. Yeah.
Yeah, crawlers, and they had and then and boats out on the lake. But there was one talking about submarines. There was one um, company there. I don't know if it was a company, but maybe just a community of hobbyists, and that was what they specialized in, submarines.
Nice.
And so I went to visit them, and they had one submarine that was 3D printed, and they gave me all the information about it. And it's it's a bit expensive to build it, but it looks pretty impressive. And
I would say it's the expensive end of the hobby, but I know it's not. But it is, generally speaking, the more like it costs more to get started in it. You have to buy the watertight cylinder,
right.
and then that whole thing is its own mess. Once you have one, if it's sized for the sub you want, you're in business now. And you could get a couple subs that fit that same cylinder, and then build your own thing from there.
Oh yeah, I
And of
guess so.
course,
Yeah,
then it's then you want to get like a quality. There's I got to get that guy on. The RC sub guy. It's
Oh, I think I know who you
Martin.
mean. Yeah.
Martin. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name now. Of course. No, I'm not going to come up with it. It's something Martin. And all I can, the RC sub guy. He is the Nautilus RC, I think is his business or whatever. We'll get a link.
I think he has a YouTube channel.
He has an amazing YouTube channel, and it's all about all the details, all the things you might want to know. But it's like he's like, okay, if you want to start, it's like $1,000 at least. So when I was building my flying submarine, it's not a dead project. It's just a postponed project.
Right.
When I was building that and designing that and coming up with what I had to do and was it even possible, I reached out to him, and my God, I hate that I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was really helpful in helping me understand what I needed to do and how I might be able to tackle the design problem of building a flying, floating, sinking airplane effectively. So yeah, I'm looking forward to when I get that going. I will go to his RC Subfest, so that we can kibitz. I'm looking forward to that day, whenever that ends up coming. But okay, enough about submarine. It's a whole
airplanes.
It's a whole separate part of the hobby, and honestly, I think I will, especially if I go back to the flying submarine project. I will have to bring him on and have him talk about that aspect of the hobby and how they're similar and how they're also very different. But yeah, it seems like a fun piece of that.
One of the things I was curious about is, if the submarine's underwater, how do you see it? Just maybe with a periscope?
Yes, essentially.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a whole, and then he's like, everybody wants to see, well, don't you have a camera on it? And he's like, yeah, I've done that, but you don't see but like 2 feet in front of you. So there's almost there's like no point. Like, unless you're in a really clear water, you're really not going to see more than maybe 5 or 10 feet at best, if you're lucky.
True, yeah.
And most of the time the antennas kind of have to stick above the water. There's only a couple of frequencies that will penetrate into the water, and even then they only go like 10 feet. So you just kind of assume where you think the craft is, and then you like surface it, and you're like, oh, hey, there it is. Not quite where I thought, but it's close, I guess that's part of the mystery, and that's part of the fun of the whole hobby. It seems like it's more an extension of the modeling hobby than it is exactly the RC hobby.
Yeah, I think you're right, because these guys,
it's all about the realists.
Yeah, they were really, really well designed. I mean, real scale models. They weren't just like a tube or anything like that. I mean, the tube was inside, of course, but the outside, was really well decorated and painted and everything. Yeah, I think you're.
Yeah. Nautilus Dry Docks.
That's his channel.
Yeah, that's at least that's, I think, his company. Oh my God, what is wrong with me?
I mean, I did get from these guys. I did get a link. I think this guy was in So it was somewhere in Europe that was one of the famous designers for these
Mhm.
submarines. Well, not the actual, the inside, what you just spoke about. That's the costly bit. The tube
Yeah.
where you have all your electronics and everything, and you could get the kit from him. So I'll have to dig that up and send it to you.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So
And,
it's rc-submarines.com, and it's run by Bob Martin.
okay.
And
It might be the
it's
same.
not
Might be the same guy.
Nautilus Dry Docks LLC. So he started out by taking the Disney Nautilus um, kit from 30,000 Leagues Under the Sea,
Mhm.
and he turned it into an RC model. And he did that partly, I think he ended up using that for some movies or something like that as well. But ultimately, that's where he kind of started. He has
Hmm.
a love for the Nautilus. That's where his passion started with the submarines. So we'll have to get Bob on. I can't believe I
Yeah.
forgot his name. Jeez. Anyway, good guy. Really just a giant wealth of knowledge. It's incredible. We'll have to get into that when I get a little bit closer, I guess, or when I see some people who are getting interested in it, I suppose. All right. So let's kind of back up, and now that you've got this rescue craft and you you finished step one of I want to fly off the water, right?
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
what inspired you to even want to go and fly off the water?
Well,
Was
it was just I got an email from one of the club members that they were going to be flying at the lake, um,
okay,
and I figured what I could do is I could just go and watch to see how it's done. So the first couple of visits down there, I think the first or maybe the first two visits, I just watched to see, what the what models they were flying, and they mainly
yeah,
don't. Most of the club members don't build planes. They just buy the E-Flight planes and Hobby
yeah,
Zone and Hobby things.
yeah. The
So they've got these
prefab homies.
pre-built planes, yeah. And so I figured I'd just go down and just watch. It's a pleasant way of spending the morning, by the lake. Anyway, you get your coffee and your chair and sit there just watching them take
Hmm.
off. And so and then I started to talk to people. And then I decided, I figured, well, if I'm gonna get into this, I'm gonna make a rescue boat first. That was like an interesting side project.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, now I have to decide which plane first to fly. What plane am I going to fly off the water?
Okay.
And so one of the decisions I had to make was one of the questions I had is how do you move around on the water? How do you taxi on the water? And
Right.
so if you've got a single engine plane, then and you don't have any sort of rudders going into the water, you've got to basically get up enough speed to have the air rudder, the regular
Right.
rudder,
Right.
steer it. And I didn't really want to do that, and I thought because it's not that maneuverable. And so I decided, well, the best approach would be to use have a twin plane, twin motor, because that way I could use differential thrust. I don't have to worry about rudders
Right.
and use the differential thrust. And so then, I saw, the Sea Duck, the FT Duck. It's a seaplane, or it's meant to be a seaplane, and
Yeah.
it's got twin motors on it. And
Yeah, and by
but
all reports, it flies amazing, and it's
yeah, yeah,
sturdy, and it has a lot of
it,
payload. So
yeah.
you can
Um,
you can build it how you want and not worry about am I building it too heavy or anything like that.
no, in fact, if you watch the build video, Josh's build video, he does the opposite to what he normally does. You don't have to be too heavy with the hot glue. He said,
Yeah.
put loads and loads of hot glue, especially where you have the joints, because you
Right.
have to make it as waterproof as possible.
Right.
So it's got lots of hot glue in there, and but it took me quite a long time to build it. There is a build video. It was more like a post build video, but I did put a
Right.
build video on the FT forum.
Okay.
I'm trying to do that for every build I do. So if I start whether it's a 3D printed plane or if it's a foam board plane,
You have noticed.
first thing I do is put a build video out there, or not a build video, but a build log, and it helps me if I want to make the plane again, and it obviously can help others, and
Yep.
if they want to build it. Because if you look at the build videos, especially on the 3D printed planes, they kind of skip over steps. They go pretty fast. I think
Yeah.
maybe think people might get bored watching the build video, but
Right.
and then you have to keep rewinding it and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, believe me, I'm
yeah,
I know. You're like, what happened? You went from here to
yeah.
here. What'd you do in between? And we're like,
Yeah, I'm
I
a
mean, I can figure it out, but it's like, boy, it'd be nice to see you do it just once
yeah,
so that I
I don't
know how it's
yeah,
supposed to
I don't build particularly quickly. I take my
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And I'll watch Josh's build, and he does it. One fold. And I'll do that fold. And then I go
Yeah.
back, pause the video, then go back and forth. And so what I try to do then is build put the build log out there. Although with the Sea Duck, I think I'm probably built it and then put the log as much as I could remember.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
but it took me about a month to build it for some reason. I'm not sure why. Yeah, because I
It's
started.
it's involved. Like it's more parts and more it feels like it's more than most planes. Most planes, it's
Mhm.
like, no, you build the top half of the fuse, and you build the bottom half. You put the wing through the thing. You make sure that's all connected. Make sure the wires are all going where they need to be. Don't forget to connect before you close
Yeah,
this up. Don't forget to do these things. And it's like, oh, whoa, this is
yeah.
more involved than the traditional plane, which is like throw some servos in it, put a motor in the front, and go.
Well,
Is
yeah, you're right. I
what
mean,
it feels like comparatively.
you have to build around electronics. So as you're
Yeah.
building, it's not just like you're just like building the airframe and then
Right.
installing the electronics. You have to do them at the same time
Together.
because
Yeah,
yeah.
together.
So I mean, it's yeah, even like the motors and everything, you have to make sure that you've got the the cables in there for the ESCs
Yeah.
inside the wing, because once you close everything up, then
Yep.
you're not going to get
It's
back in.
watertight. You don't
Yeah,
wanna mess with it
yeah,
because you don't. You wanna keep all the electronics inside the watertight container
right.
as much as you can. It's like, okay. When I'm looking at the quack, I was about to start putting all the things. I'm like, no, no. I need to get the servos in now, and I need to get the wires ready. And I better figure out which motors I'm gonna put on this one because the motors have to be part of this. You know what I mean? Like I've got to fish a lot of wires. Well, it feels like a lot of. It's probably not, I'm probably making more out of it than I should. But to do that, it's like, oh, that's going to be more involved. I can't just close this up and then do it after the. It will be far harder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think
I
that
got it.
that
Yeah.
yeah that kind of delayed me because I obviously wanted to make sure that things like the servos were connected correctly before I
Hmm.
closed everything up. But I just took my time, and then I did paint it. And that's one things I did find out with some of the YouTube videos is if you're not going to use any sort of waterproofing, you need, because I did actually build it with the brown water resistant foam
Water
board.
resistant foam board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got a whole box of that still that I was using up, and I think it's about seven sheets of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It
and
uses
so
it's a 7 or 8 sheet wonder. It
yeah,
definitely has a lot.
um,
If you haven't, this is a word to somebody who's like and listening and going, if you're a foam board builder, right? Like if you build out of Dollar Tree foam board, you kind of follow the most of the flight test stuff. Foam board, if you haven't experienced it yet, if it gets wet at all, it turns back into a pulp pretty much, and it loses all strength, all the paper strength goes away. So it's really important that you, like you said, either paint it and paint it well, end up actually having a much probably heavier plane because you're putting more paint on it, but it becomes the weather protector. A lot of people will put polyurethane. They will do their plane however they want, and at the end they'll just give it a good solid set of coats of polyurethane spray,
I mean,
or with a
yeah,
brush.
I did see like the use of Minwax
Yep,
was a
a
good way
water.
to seal it. Yeah, and then there
Hmm.
was another video he did some tests. I can't remember. He did some tests with different waterproofing stuff, And in the end, his conclusion was paint. Paint was the best because
Yeah.
it sealed it off. But what's important with that, I think, is that you need to spray the edges, or either that, or you put, when most of the flight test planes, Josh will say, just for strength and stopping the paper, coming
If you want to
away from
keep
the
it for
front.
longer, put
Yeah.
some hot glue around the edges, but
Yeah. And
it's a
then just,
must.
put a thin layer of hot glue on the edges, and then just scrape it off with a piece of scrap foam.
Right.
And that is really important. I didn't do that on some of the. I did it on like the front parts, but not the back.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're thinking,
And
"Oh, it's just gonna run into the water there," and you're like, "No."
yeah,
Now that you've done it, it's like, well, the water sprays up. It hits all along the bottom of the wing. The tail sits in the water, right? So if you're, I mean, not a ton, but it still sits in the water, and if you haven't waterproofed it, it's gonna start infiltrating there, right?
so yeah, the bottom line is you have to make it. You have to either seal it with Minwax, paint, lots of hot glue,
Yeah.
just so that the water cannot creep under the edges, because that's what I
Okay.
think a lot of. So what I've been doing is every time I've been to the lake and I come back to the bench, and all the paper starting to come away in different parts of the plane. So I just put hot glue, stick them down, and then it's good enough for the next
Okay.
time. So,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's going to last very long. I
Hey,
think it's gonna, yeah.
I have a suggestion for you, that,
Mhm.
uh, bring a towel with you.
Yes. I think that's a good that's a good idea. 'Cause
I
I just yeah,
I came up with that one when I tried my Sea Angel.
right.
Um, I ended up, I think I had an extra shirt or something in my car, and I was like, this needs to go in the wash anyway," and I used it as a
Mhm.
towel, and it made me feel a lot better because, most of the time it's like the water will bead up on top of the waterproof foam board. It's kind of like a waxy coating on it. Um, but if you leave it on there, the water will start to infiltrate.
Yeah.
So your best bet is to remove the water once you're done as soon as you can, if it isn't just, water.
Yeah, I
Oh,
must admit, I've just like let it dry in the sun. I've
yeah,
not
yeah,
bothered to wipe it down. But you're right, it's probably a good thing at least. But I'd like to make another one because it
yeah. Go
once
ahead.
one
Yeah.
it's now I've built
Well,
one. I can it was obviously the second one is it would go a lot smoother, maybe a lot
right.
faster.
So
Um,
what would you do this time differently than you did the first time?
I think I would probably try to seal stuff before I actually assemble the the parts. So what I did this time is I built the whole frame and I
Okay.
didn't paint it. I didn't paint anything until the end, and then I painted it.
Okay.
Okay, but I think what I would probably do is try to seal off, especially like for example, like the horizontal stabilizer.
Yeah.
At the moment that's like
It's just one piece of foam basically,
yeah,
right?
it's almost it looks at the moment it was horizontal, but now it's like an inverted V tail. Um,
Yeah, I see it. Yeah. I see what you're
and
talking
so
about.
yeah, so because it's not just the paper coming off, it's the whole sheet is starting to warp. It's starting to
Yeah.
because it got so much water underneath. One of the things that in the build video, Josh does use a lot of tape on the fuselage part. So
Yeah.
he puts loads and loads of tape. So there's a whole almost a whole reel of tape underneath there. So
So
uh,
and there's a
yeah,
lot of people who swear by the tape, and I love
yeah,
using tape to color my foam board planes because it's quick, easy color, right? To
right.
me, it broad swath. Look at that, it's color. Now you can tell what direction it's going. But what I've noticed is when it's got water, it'll hold for like one or two goes. I made a hovercraft, and of course, you send it out in the morning, and it's dew covered grass. By the time, like 5-10 minutes later of running a battery, now you've got the tapes coming off, the foam
Yeah.
board's getting soggy, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh shoot, that's not working like I
Yeah,
thought.
I
It's
saw
not as
that
solid.
I saw that there was water had infiltrated under the tape.
Yeah,
So
yeah, the edges
um,
don't seal
no,
super well. So
yeah,
I'm wondering if like maybe a laminate. I wonder if using like Doculam roll or something like that, and just kind of really just going hog wild on covering it with that might make a better
yeah.
seal.
I think I put this link to this. There's a guy that wrote. he actually like lives near a lake, and he built the Sea Duck, and he had something like 400 flights from his Sea Duck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he used to fly like every day. So he wrote this article for the FT. There's like not the forum, but there's articles.
Yeah, the FT articles section.
I put it in the build video. He's linked to that
Okay.
because he built I think he built one for his friend as well, and it's his whole experience of flying the Sea Duck off water, on a regular basis, and he did so towards the end. He lists a bunch of improvements to make to the Sea Duck, and I was trying to follow those, and I think one of them was to cover it in some sort of vinyl, something, at least underneath, not so much maybe on top, but underneath.
I always wondered how well vinyl would do. Like, obviously, vinyl itself is waterproof. It's more about the edges. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I think. That's what I was sitting there worried about.
And the other thing I thought, maybe make the hull part of the Sea Duck, maybe even make that 3D printed, instead of foam, so that it would be safe. But the actual, I think the boat part seems to be okay now. Now that I've put more tape on, it's just the thing that's suffering them mainly is the horizontal stabilizer at the back, and of course the elevator as well is kind of warped. So that's making it more difficult to get off the water. But once it takes off, it flies really, really well, and it's very slow. I don't want to. I'm not particularly fast. I don't like my planes too fast, but especially when it's on a lake and you've got people around and that. So so it flies. Somebody commented it flies like a C-130. It's a really docile plane. Yeah. The other thing that I did have trouble with, and so it's got two pontoons coming down from the wingtips.
Yep.
And if you land too fast, they tend to break. They'll come away. And it's happened a couple of times. But I think Josh, he added some popsicle sticks so that they're a little bit more secure, like a wedge. And I did the same. In fact, he just added one. I added two, and so that was an easy fix. And that seems to be a little bit more robust because those things are basically just slotted into the wing.
And they're just 2 layers of foam board or whatever it is.
Yeah. So if you land, unless you land slow, and you don't sort of bounce like I do sometimes, then they break off. They'll break off easily.
That brings me to something that you mentioned, or the advice. Did you get any advice before? I think you mentioned you had some advice before you started, from like what do I have to do to land? How do I do this landing and taking off of water? Was there any advice you got from those guys who had been doing it a while?
Not really from the club guys. I found a YouTube video, which I think I also put in my build video, and basically it was a video on how to take off, off from water and how to land on water, and I put it in the build log link to in the maybe you could put the build log in the notes. And then
I'd like to do that. Yeah.
So what he suggested is that you have full up elevator, so maximum up elevator to start off with, but as you pick up speed along, as you're going across the water, increase the throttle, not
steadily,
not don't sort of suddenly put the throttle full throttle, because that's not good. That's not good.
Yeah. No.
Just do it gradually. But as it picks up speed, as the plane picks back pressure of the elevator, so you basically you're moving the elevator down now. So the plane should by this time have got a bit of an angle of attack and should leave the water, in theory.
So what I've heard is basically you go, like you said, Give it a little bit of down pressure, give it some speed. Once it starts to get speed, bring it neutral, and it should come up once it's on the step, which
Mm,
means the back half of whatever
yeah,
the float surface is off the water.
right.
Now it's because that back half basically gets sucked down. It's almost like glue. The water creates an adhesion,
It is as
basically.
well. I mean, if you don't, yeah, yeah, you're
And
right.
and
You,
that
you
and
want,
that's an adhesion behind the CG,
yeah,
which, as everybody knows, is bad news for flying.
mhm, mhm,
Once that back half leaves and you're on the step and you're skimming at the front half of the float,
right.
you now can then pull again, slowly pull the elevator back to give kind of a gentle upward
Yeah,
trajectory. Once
yeah,
it
you,
leaves the water, you can do whatever you want, but
yeah, yeah. You don't want it going, like vertically, suddenly going vertically, So
yeah,
you want to have a more of a gradual takeoff
right.
from the water. But you're right. You need to have those. You need to start easing off on the elevator once the front of the floats is really off the water, and
Mhm.
also if you have flaps, it's good to have half flaps, is what I've been told. I don't up until now. I don't have none of those planes that I've flown so far off the water. They don't have flaps, but
You could add that to the Sea Duck really easy.
I could actually add flaperons.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
I could
you could do flaperons, or I mean, again,
or flaps.
add
Yeah. Mm.
add 1 or 2 servos and connect them, and
Yeah,
then have
yeah,
them just
yeah, yeah.
actuate flap.
Uh,
But anyway, yeah,
yeah, I thought about maybe doing flaperons, but
that would work. Yeah.
the yeah, so if you do have so the Model BXL Eclipse-on plane that I've currently under construction, that's got flaps. So
Okay.
I'll try it because one of the guys at the club said half flaps for takeoff, full flaps for landing. Yeah, no,
Okay, so that
yeah,
probably leads to the full flaps gives you real low speed. Gives you enough lift where at low speed you'll still have enough to fly in, and
right,
that means the slower the better, right? Then your pontoons don't come off.
yep,
That's probably what
yep.
he's
And then
yeah.
and then um, And then the other advice on that video was that you want to keep, when you come in, you want to almost you come in under power. Okay, you don't cut like you do on the ground.
Well, you're not
You almost
supposed to do that anyway. You're supposed to
no
fly it to the ground,
to the ground.
technically.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's
I
what a
mean,
lot of RC pilots don't do. Most people kind
yeah,
of come in close, cut
yeah,
it, and glide in,
yeah. You're about 3 feet off the ground, and then you just cut it and then just flat.
and it drops.
But
You're like, okay, I did it.
but no, you want to sort of almost skim across the water. You're just a few inches off the water. Um, and and then really just ease off on the throttle. And if you have flaps, again, it's full flaps would obviously slow you down. If you several times I've come in far too fast, and it
Yeah.
it bounces on the water.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I was thinking about bouncing on the water is probably not as bad as bouncing on the ground.
No, it's not. You have a
Yeah,
little bit of leeway, right? You're displacing the water. It's not
yeah,
just crushing your plane.
no,
It's got
yeah,
a lot more give. I found it easier to land on the water
yeah,
and take off, but you have to be very careful, right? You have to have a low angle approach. And like you said, you just have to come in slow and let it skim. Because if you give, and you have to have power, because if you don't, the bottom of your plane will catch, and it'll catch like glue. It'll grab, and the rest of the plane still wants to keep going.
yeah,
That's where the
yeah.
battery is, and it's gonna dump over like a World War One biplane.
Yeah, and
You know,
that's typically what happens. The few rescues I've done with the rescue boat, people have come in and then they've, the front of the floats will probably hit the water first, and then the plane just tips
right?
over. You know,
Yeah,
um, yeah,
that's what you need to tell them. Oh, you were under power. You need to
uh,
keep in. You come in
uh,
under power.
yeah. I mean, most people fly pretty well, but just that, you know, it's always good to have that security of being able to rescue the boat,
Right.
rescue the planes.
Nice. Well,
Um,
I put a link to what I think is the article in these the
oh yes,
comment
that
section.
is it. Yeah, the
Is
sea
that
duck.
okay? Cool. All right.
Yeah, that is the sea
Way
duck
off.
experience. Yeah, yeah, that was very. I found that early on when I was, you know, and like I said, this guy, uh, he's sea duck. flew like I think it's 400 times.
It's something. Yeah, he said he went through like 240 batteries worth of
Yeah,
flights and
so
all
it was
that
like,
stuff.
so because either he owns the lake or he flew this every day almost, for a
Right.
certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But I
So
think,
it's
there was something about making it a little bit better waterproof at the
yep.
end of that article. Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about some of the specific weaknesses of the plane, but he does go over a lot of waterproofing techniques and things to watch for when you're
Yep.
making a plane. Like when I'm looking at my hinges, I think I'm just going to cut, and I'm actually going to use a dowel and straws and
Mm.
attach them with glue or
Right.
whatnot. That way, instead of the paper hinge, right,
Oh,
or the tape hinge, which is probably going to get water underneath and let
the
go.
bevel. Yeah, that's what I found with the bevel cut.
Yeah.
That's where the water is getting in. Even though I did put
Right.
some glue in there, just to
Yeah.
try to seal it. But I
Yep.
think at least on the elevator, that's where it's mainly getting in. I may have to
Yeah.
actually cut the elevator off and renew
So
that.
one of the things I saw, Julius Pradana, I think, is he does a lot of Depron stuff. But when he makes his
Mm,
hinges, sometimes he'll take whatever the rod he has, that's the hinge rod, basically.
right.
He'll take a piece of paper and he'll roll it around. He'll do like 3 or 4 rolls of
Yeah.
whatever kind of paper, and then he'll use CA around that. He'll have basically waxed up
Oh
whatever
yeah.
the
Okay.
hinge is,
Yeah.
and
Right.
then he'll let the CA kick, and then basically becomes a solid plastic roll with paper
Mm,
core. So it's essentially composite, and then he cuts that, and then so every other one gets attached to the rudder, and the other half goes to the front, right? And
mm,
then he either glues that with CA or he glues it uses a tape hinge or something like that, and then it's
right.
a solid hinge, and it works exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds better. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been meaning. I've tried that a couple times. I've also done the using a thin 1/8 inch barbecue skewer and a large coffee stir, like a large
Mm,
diameter coffee stir, which is just a little bit bigger than 1/8. And I've
mm.
cut that into little segments, and then I tape that, and it ends up
Oh,
actually creating a really good hinge. You gotta keep it tight,
yeah.
but it works out really well. So,
Yeah,
um,
it would help a lot, I think, because like I said, not so much on the ailerons. They seem to have got,
yeah,
well,
hold up, okay,
yeah, well, because they're a bit higher,
yeah,
the
the
tail kind of,
splash doesn't come
yeah,
up that
yeah, yeah,
high.
yeah.
Whereas
Uh,
the sea duck, most of the back end of the plane will some of them will either sit close to or sit in the water
yeah,
when
yeah,
it's come to rest.
yeah, yeah. This
Is what
almost
I've
sits in the
noticed.
water. The bottom of the vertical stabilizers is almost touching the water. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So
and then when you, mm,
making the hinges out of some sort of plastic material,
mm,
those little plastic sheets with CA would probably
mm,
be a really good hinge
yeah.
technique as well, even if it's in the foam, because that would be water resistant, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's definitely some improvements because once you get that water under the paper,
it's
I
yeah.
just yeah,
It starts falling apart, and it's
it
disappointing
does.
'cause you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
"I
yeah.
really
Well,
like this plane, I wanna
yeah.
fly it more."
Well, I decided, I was going to, like ground the plane because all the paper, and I thought
Yeah.
I'm just going to fly this into the end.
Yeah. Yeah, why not,
Why
right?
not? I mean, what have I got to lose? I mean, it's
Well, a bunch of electronics that end up sinking to the bottom
well,
if
that's
it
true. Yeah, yeah,
does
yeah,
No, you'll probably be fine, but,
yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah. There is too. Yeah, that's true. I mean,
It
the electronics seem to be okay. I mean, it's just
yeah,
it's mainly the
talk about how you waterproof the electronics for the Sea Duck and the Tutor and, what was the other one you said you had? That you fly? Oh, one of the 3D printed planes. Do you? So I've heard a lot of people basically said if you're going to fly in the rain, don't even bother waterproofing because the water's never really going to get inside your plane with enough of anything. Your foam is always going to keep it
mm,
safer, right? And foam floats, so if most of the time if your plane even crashes in the water, it's really floating on the water. It's not really like submerging.
yeah. I mean, if the
Um,
plane tips upside down, you're actually floating on the wings. If you've got
right.
a high wing plane, which most people have. When I've noticed when I had to rescue a couple of people, it's completely turned upside down. So the only time that you probably would get wet, is it if the plane actually crashed into the water, so the nose, went into the water.
Dumps all the way in.
Yeah, most of the time, if it's just tipped over, then the electronics are okay. But I think there's two schools of thought, is what I found when I did some research.
Okay, what's that?
There's the people that don't do anything, don't protect their electronics at all, and then there's the people that use some sort of chemicals spray.
Yeah.
I think there's
Corrosion X.
I think that's it. Is it Corrosion X? Yeah,
Corrosion X is one. I know quadcopter guys use this hydroscopic. I could be getting that backwards. And it's like a shake and bake almost, where you put the component in and it's this sort of liquid that's super expensive, but you only need a tiny bit and you just shake it. Each one of those handles contacts differently. So if you have a button, like your RC receiver has a button to change from, I don't know, different modes, right? Or your ESC has a button. Most ESCs are pretty straightforward. So you can just do that and it won't destroy the contacts because there are no contacts. It just waterproofs it. Everything's good. I've also, the Corrosion X, I think, is the one where if it gets underneath, if there's a button, if there's a switch, it will get underneath the contact and it will stop working. What you can do, though, is you can hot glue that button or switch, spray, and then take off the hot glue.
Okay.
And then the hot glue basically protects it from the spray, but once the spray's done, you can go back, and then the chances that the water will get in and under a button or a switch on an RC receiver, or a lot of people are doing it with the flight controllers, and they have a couple, like they have a bootloader button and something else that needs protection from that kind of process.
Yeah, I well, in the end, I didn't actually protect my electronics at all. So
okay. And you haven't had a problem yet. Where do you put the receiver in the sea duct?
Well, there's a basic, on the top of the
there's a top half of the fuse. Yeah,
there's a battery hatch. In fact, I did have to replace the battery hatch because the spray, it got so wet.
Yeah.
So I designed a 3D printed battery hatch, and that's helped a lot. It's just got there's a couple of magnets in it, and so it just sticks to the top.
Makes sense.
So basically inside that, it's a pretty big area, so you can.
Yeah, it's like a 1 inch by 3 by 6.
Yeah, it's maybe about 3 by 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah,
and
before you get into the lower cavity where you get all the room in the world.
Yeah, I mean, because they're inside that sort of boat section. It looks like a boat.
It is. Yeah.
You've got like a shelf, which is where the battery sits and the electronics. So I've just got a little receiver just inside there as well. And I did install an Aurora 5 light.
Okay.
Which I did on most of my planes, but I had to install it upside down under the wing.
Okay. Try to keep it as away from, or is that where the center of mass?
Actually, with the Aurora, you don't have to worry too much about putting it in the center of gravity that much. Okay. It can be either side. It probably would be best to have it in there, but I read that it's not so important.
Okay.
Not like some, typically like flight controllers, they say put it at the center of gravity.
They always say you need it to be right on it, and we're like, most of them are like, well, close. Get it close.
No, it was more that if I didn't have room to put it on the shelf where the battery is, so I stuck it underneath, and it's pretty solid because it's on the wing. It's stuck on the wing, but it's a little bit tricky to get to. So if I want to press the buttons underneath, and I can't really see what I'm pressing and stuff. So it's,
because you had to close up the back hatch. Back hatch is how I built a mini version of the sea duct ages ago. Yeah. And that back hatch is giant. It was enough to get my hand in there and do all sorts of wiring stuff, and that was the small version. It was running off of FPAC, so it wasn't as big. It still had plenty of room.
Yeah, so and also I did actually have to I had to buy a couple of batteries. Mainly I've used 2200 3-cell batteries for most of my planes, or either 2200 or 1300. For the smaller planes. and so I ended up getting and they weren't heavy enough to balance
No.
the CG. And so and plus it's got twin CPAC engines on it,
Right.
motors on it, so you need a bit of power. So I ended up using 3S 3300 batteries.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay. Yeah.
that balances out just perfect. The center
Nice.
of gravity is just balanced perfectly, and I can get about. I mean, I don't do a lot of aerobatics, but I can get about 6 or 7 minutes flight time
Okay.
easily.
Off of
Yeah,
off of
yeah,
3-cell 3300.
yeah.
What if
Um,
you could probably put 2 in there, and then you'd be running it for a while.
yeah, I probably could. I think I could probably actually squeeze out maybe 10 minutes on one of those batteries because,
Yeah. Yeah. If you did.
yeah.
Oh,
But
good. Nice.
yeah, so no, it was a good experience doing the Sea Duck. And I think I would probably build it again. But like I said, probably maybe seal some of the foam board. I might just make it out of regular foam board and like paint parts before actually but before I glue them in.
Right.
So rather than glue everything together and then try to make it waterproof, actually
Yeah.
try to make each part as waterproof as possible before
Well,
assembly.
I think
Yeah.
when I did mine, when I built the hull, again, this was the Mini. I think
Yeah.
all I had was tape at the time. So I taped the inside and the outside. I thought that was going to be awesome. And it ultimately ended up being good, but it was not perfect. It's what it was. So,
Yeah.
okay, so the golden age of float planes is 1930s, 1940s era, right?
Yeah, well, I guess so.
Do you
So,
have a plane in that era that's like your
well,
and then
I don't have a plane. I mean, the only float planes that I do have at the moment, the Sea Duck,
yeah, I'm
the
saying do you have an inspiration? So that's a Conwing L16, I think, right?
the Sea Duck.
Yeah.
I think it was based off the cartoon series
Oh,
Tailspin.
it is, but that plane
Yeah.
is in fact that is in fact a real plane.
Okay. And
Um,
then, well, I've got so that plane and yeah, the one
yeah.
that I would like, the scale plane that I would like to build is a Catalina.
Okay. Conwing L16 is
Yeah,
the plane. That was
and I
the
think
Catalina.
the
Okay.
Catalina was a 30s plane, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
and it was used, right up until I think the 60s, maybe even later.
Well, and that's the thing is
Um,
they weren't making a whole lot of new, but they thought that was the only way you're going to get across the ocean, right?
right.
Because the only way to get enough fuel is to have, you have to have a really big plane, and those planes didn't have runways big enough,
Mm,
right? So consequently, the only way you could get big enough runway was to go on the water. And of course, if they're transcontinental, well, you're going from shore to shore, so that works out. And then there was a couple more advancements. The jet engine really kind of opened up the whole like, oh, I guess we don't need boat planes anymore. And
yeah.
then that era ended. But yeah, I'm trying to look for an actual picture of Conwing L117 or Conwing L17. I'm only coming up with the Sea Duck.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Mm. Yeah. So 3D lab print.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a Catalina design, and it's pretty big for a 3D printed plane. It's a 1.7 meter
Okay, yeah, it's pretty big.
wingspan. Yeah. So it's pretty big. So I think you know maybe not in the next few weeks, but a bit later on, because I've probably got about 3 other planes. I just got the Eclipse on Spitfire. So
I guess the question is, do you need to prepare? Because I know with the submarines, they
mhm.
talk about it because I 3D printed a submarine is how I built my submarine, right? There was a lot of discussion about basically epoxy coating the inside and the outside of the
Oh
of
yeah.
the cylinder because of the shell. Otherwise, it'll take on water. Like ultimately, there's going to be holes in your 3D printing. It's never going to
Mm.
be
Oh yeah, because you're basically gluing parts together. You're CA
right.
gluing parts together.
Not yeah. Even if your CE
Yeah.
glue was perfect, there's still lines, there's inherently going to be some. Yours is actually fine tuned. You probably won't have too many gaps. But like when I print mine, sometimes it gets a little under extruded, and then there's a little hole, and it's like, and then once that gets into the interstitial, right, in the grid, now you're
Yeah.
filling that whole thing up with water, and it doesn't really have a
Yeah.
great way to escape.
Well,
So they're
I
like,
just
no, epoxy coat everything.
I just put together the floats for the Eclipse on model BXL, and the
Okay.
only suggestion that they had is they do suggest painting it. Even though you may have printed it in the right color, because you can obviously get different color filament.
Right.
But they still say spray paint it, because that will seal any holes.
Okay.
So that's the only thing I've done. I haven't obviously flown. I still have to put the electronics in and stuff on the model BXL. But
Nice.
yeah, I just painted the floats with a fair bit of spray paint. Just a
Okay.
rattle can spray paint. But the actual, I mean, but the fact that it's plastic,
Yeah.
unlike foam board, it's probably going to be a little bit more resilient to the water than foam
Yeah.
board. Yeah.
So, and that's part of what, when we go back to the whole flying submarine,
Mm.
I realized at a certain point, even if I get the model to fly, right, get it to fly and get it to do the thing on the water, I will never get it to sink because foam is just too buoyant, right?
Mm.
I'd have to weigh it down with like 5 pounds of battery or whatever, and it's like, well, I can't have a fly. It's just not enough wing area, because I think it was like a 40-inch wingspan, maybe, or 45.
Mhm.
It's not enough to haul up 5 pounds, generally speaking. So what I realized is, like, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to 3D print it. I'm going to have to create basically a plastic shell model, keep it as light as possible.
Mm.
Honestly, doing lightweight PLA, I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse. Thought about a bunch of different ways to do that. I thought about even getting like super thin aluminum sheet and
Mm.
making little forms and just stamp them and make a
Well,
skin and
um,
make it like
on
they used to. I don't know.
actually, just I forgot to mention that on Thingiverse, some of the parts there are people have designed parts, 3D printed parts for the Sea Duck. So
Oh
like
yeah,
so like the pontoons that and of course the pontoons they leak. The water gets underneath the paper there. So what that could be an
yeah.
improvement as well, is to 3D print those
Okay,
pontoons.
yeah.
That would help. I don't really want to make a complete 3D printed Sea Duck, but
No, but
um,
there's cowlings and a couple
yeah,
other aspects,
yeah,
maybe like
yeah,
you did
cowling,
with making a hinge,
yeah,
any hatches.
yeah. So
The guy mentioned that is one of the biggest weak points anywhere there's a hatch,
yeah.
right?
Like I said, I did make a. He mentioned too he'd made a hatch, I think, but he never published the file. So I I ended up designing a pretty simple hatch, and that works that works really well. That's kept the water out. Um, but
Nice.
yeah, so the plane that I would the next the next seaplane or plane that I would take off of water would be the Catalina. That's the one that's on
Okay.
3D lab print, because that looks a nice, that's kind of like that's more like it's kind of like a thin sea duck. Because you've got the motors on the top of the wings, which is kind of interesting, design.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the solution. So, how do you keep the engine from basically getting submerged or splashed? One of the a lot of the Italian ones, kind of like the Sea Angel.
Mm.
Um, I built a model of, now I'm gonna blank on it. Um, it was an Italian model World War II plane that was basically two hulls with a big flying wing on it, and it had like a tail in the back, right? And it had two, a pusher and a tractor and a pusher,
Oh, yeah.
on a nacelle sitting above the wing, right? So
Yeah.
it sat on the water on the hulls. That's what I'm calling the fuselage hull parts. Then it has the basically big flying wing, and there's a little kind of almost like a speedboat cockpit,
Right.
like a
Yeah.
little tiny, amidst this giant wing and this giant plane,
Right.
right? And then there's like this super big nacelle just kind of perched on top. Same with the
Oh, yeah.
seaplane, and that was one of the ways they kept the motors
Yeah, off the water,
free and
yeah,
clear.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that
that
because the motors are if they're above the wing, and then they're not gonna get so much spray or anything, yeah.
right, and that's
Yeah.
obviously the Catalina, the PBY 5A, right? I think
I
is
think I
the
think the one on 3D, yeah, I think it's the 5 that's on
okay.
the one
But
that
yeah, I
had
mean
that.
that motor, I mean that wing is like on a what would that be called? A stanchion, kind of like it sits above the main fuse.
Yeah.
Um, in this kind of pylon.
It's a
And
it's a
that's to keep to keep the props out of the water.
right.
You know,
Y Yeah, yeah.
it's
No, that
it's a neat plane.
yeah, yeah. No, no, it looks, and it was used, I think, in, in some of the conflicts. I'm not sure. I think it might have been used in must have been used in World War II, more for like, you know, um, as a cargo type plane, I think. And I think it was used by the Canadians for rescue, sea rescue.
Yeah.
So it went through a whole bunch of different. We should do a history on that. On that
I was
plane.
gonna say you just identified the next history segment for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, we should have talked about the. If I had thought about it, I would have done the
But
Conwing L16.
right.
Given the real history of the Sea Duck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't. I just assumed. I didn't realize it was based on that. I guess the cartoon based it off that real plane,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I
then
mean, and that's
Flight
if
Test
you
based it
lived
off.
on an right, if you lived on an island and you had a cargo business, that's like the penultimate cargo plane,
Yeah.
sea-based cargo plane. There's a couple more obviously, but you know, um that's the one. So I mean, they did a good job, of course, because it's a sea duck. They made it look like a duck with the yellow and the red, I guess. Makes it more ducky. I know a lot of people will make it yellow with an orange front, so it looks like a darker duckbill. It's kind of fun.
Mhm. Yeah,
The
I mean, I wasn't even aware of the cartoon. I sent a picture of it to my son, and he said, he said that is that based on the cartoon? And and I said, no, I'm not sure. And then when I think I looked at the old build video that Josh put together, and
right.
they mentioned that this cartoon called Tailspin.
Yep, Tailspin. That's the one from
Yeah,
Disney. It's on Disney Plus right now. You can watch
has
it.
it really? Yeah.
Yep. My kid ended up. I was like, "Hey, what do you think of this one?" I started watching. He's like, he buzzed through the whole thing. He really.
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, this is a good one, Dad." And then he watched all the other ones that I grew up watching too. I was like, he's watching the things that I used to watch. We have common ground now. We can talk about that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, and it's just one of those things. You grow up not even thinking about all the influences that you kind of had, at least in when I was growing up. Um, and it's kind of fun to kind of come back on it and look at it from a totally different light. So, yeah, no. So why don't we close out?
Hmm.
Because we've already done the lightning round for you. Why don't we do the what are the 5 things that a noob doing this should take away? So what are like the top 5 things that they need to know or need to do before they get as they get into this part of the hobby? What's your advice?
Well, like I said, is the number one for me was to have some form of rescue mechanism
Hmm.
in case I got into trouble. One guy. This was a few weeks back. As he was taking off, his propeller just came off. He obviously had not tightened the prop,
Oh,
and so the plane is just sitting there.
oh,
And then if you've got a bit of wind, and typically the wind is going away from shore, so
right.
your plane just starts to get further and further away from you. So I figured, yeah, the number one thing would be to have some sort of rescue. Whether it's a rescue boat like I built, or you have a canoe, a kayak, or paddleboard. I mean,
Right.
sometimes we can get people to we can shout out
Passerbys.
to people. Can you pick that plane up for me, please?
Yeah,
Uh,
remind me. We talked about it together, and that's why I probably forgot about it. But because you're flying at a park and you're not at an AMA sanctioned field, it would be remiss of us not to mention that if you are flying something over 250 grams, you need to make sure that your plane has remote ID. That's what you're supposed to do. The FAA
Yep.
has
And
required that everybody does it.
yep. In fact, that was one of the questions I had for the guy that organizes this group of our members every Friday.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the park does allow. Well, the first thing you really should do is check to see where if you're flying in a park, do they have any sort of ban on drone flying? Which obviously planes are.
Right. Are there restrictions or limitations?
Yeah, are there any restrictions? And it's a state park where we fly. So and that they do allow, actually they've always allowed, even drone flying, as long as you obey the rules.
Right.
And of course, now one of the rules is to have a remote ID.
Yep.
I haven't actually seen anybody checking for it. So, and but it does add another. I mean, I've got the flight test remote ID module. That's the one I bought. I mean, you only have to buy one, so you can move it around from plane to plane.
Yeah, it's a recreational operator.
But it is $100. It does add $100 to your plane, and
it's potentially $100 lost in the bottom of the.
Yes, and another $100 that can get wet. So
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then then what I found is you can install it. I can install it in the sea duct. That's not a problem. I can install it in the but I found it really nowhere to put it in the what's it called, the cub.
The cub you said was limited space in the fuse.
Yeah, there's just nowhere to put it, so I'm kind of not really going to fly that. Really, it's just too restrictive. But so you want a reasonably sized plane to put that extra piece of electronics, and I think you have to have it. You kind of have to have it exposed as well, so that's another thing to think about. I did download the case. There is a 3D printed case for the flight test, because otherwise it's just a PCB board, just a
pretty much. Yeah, it's an open bare board.
Yeah. So there is which keeps it somewhat off the water.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need to check on any sort of local laws that may stop you from flying in that area.
Yeah, thank you for.
But I mean where we fly, there's loads of park rangers around, that then they talk to us, and they've been asking us about their hobby and stuff, so they're pretty.
You got to get them involved.
Yeah, I tell you one thing that they don't allow, and that's gas engines. We can only fly electric because
that's potentially contaminant, right?
Well, I think it's more for a noise. It's a park, and it's got to be somewhat.
I'm assuming there's no motorboats, or are there motorboats?
No, there's yeah, there are motorboats. Yeah, in fact, the only motorboat the only motorboat I've seen is the guy that has the speaker, and he does. There's like a boat that travels along with a rowing boat. With the race when they do racing.
Yeah.
And maybe they make an exception for that. I
don't coxswain.
Well, I mean, it's a separate boat. It's another is a motorized craft, and they just basically follow along, giving instructions to the rowers, and they come up fast, so you have to be careful with these guys. They move, So and then you probably need it's good to have a spotter, because if you have
AMA regulation requires.
Yeah. I mean, especially on the lake, because sometimes you get swimmers come up, and the only way you can see the swimmer is they usually have a little thing on the back, a little
like
float,
a backpack or a cap.
Yeah, a little a float, so that I guess mainly for boats, so boats can see it, or kayaks can see them.
Yeah.
And so you'll be flying, and sort of you see this guy comes up, under the water, because they're sort of underneath.
It makes you feel like Flight Fest all over again, right?
Yes. But apart from that would be just to make sure that the lake allows for flying planes. and you have remote ID.
Okay.
And then that's which number were
First
we
was build a rescue craft, right? And
at?
then
Well, just either that or have some form of rescue.
yeah,
Whether it's But I mean, I found it quite fun to play around with the rescue boat.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Let's see. Talk about the waterproofing, right?
yeah,
To
yeah.
figure out how you want to do that before you get too far.
Yeah, especially if it's like we talked about, with the foam board. I mean, if you're flying a foamy or something like that, that's pretty much that's not
Even if
really a
you're
problem.
building a balsa plane, and there's balsa.
No, yeah,
The Polaris is a traditional balsa. Most of the time they're made out of foam, but even still, if you got to decide what you want to do with it, right? ESCs are not waterproof. They're essentially a bare electronics board with a shrink wrap around it. That's not waterproof.
no, no, no. So
Whereas
yeah, so,
whereas motors are, though, the wiring is coated,
mhm.
so it is waterproof. So what is that? Brushless motors are effectively waterproof.
Yeah, I think the brushless motors, even if they get dipped into the water, they'll
Yeah.
usually
No, you
survive after you dry them out.
submerge them all you want. It's the salt water that you
Yeah.
really need to just make sure to dry them off after. Okay. So
Um,
what's the next thing after they've got a rescue craft and they've figured out their waterproofing setup?
take off and landing.
Right. Yep. Takeoff and landing, and then taxing. You talked about taxiing around
Oh,
first.
taxing. Yeah, I would say taxing is the best. That's right. I couldn't read my writing, but yeah. The maneuverability on the water is important. That's probably number three. Yeah, I think that would be number
Mhm.
three because, and that's why I decided to do the sea duct because it was easy to have. Having the twin motors. You can set up differential thrust on your transmitter,
Yep.
and it makes it really easy to move around. I mean, basically the same mechanism that I'm using on the rescue boat. Um, and then if you have a single engine plane, if you just rely on the air, what we'd say the air rudder, then you do need to pick up a bit of speed to make it turn,
Mhm.
which I thought might be a bit tricky, but I've seen other people, handle that fairly well. It's just that, you're not turning in the water. You've got no real mechanism
Right.
for turning in the water. And then some of the larger planes will have float rudders. So
Okay.
for
Yep.
example, the Model B XL I'm building, it's got a little rudder that sits on the back of the float, and
Right.
that's got a little like a servo arm on the top, and it's elastic. You put a little rubber band, hook that over, so it's pushed over this way, and then you put a piece of fishing line up to the air rudder. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
as you turn the air rudder, you're
It's
turning
nice.
this float rudder as well. And some planes I've noticed, some of the foamy planes, they'll actually have two. They'll have one on each. Uh,
Okay.
so they're really the only three ways of maneuvering in the water.
Yeah.
And then and I suppose four and five would be learning to take off on water.
Hmm.
Like I said earlier, you want to
It's
you
not
want
the same as you take off on land. It's sort of easier,
yeah
is what I found. Is I thought it was much easier,
yeah.
but at the same point, it is tricky. You can't just gun it and pull back on the stick
Well,
and do it. Like
yeah.
you gotta run it up and let it run out until it's on the step, and then you can,
And also, you're thinking, I mean, if you do crash, then it's going to take a little bit of time to get your plane back to the shore,
yeah,
So whereas, you could just walk out to the runway or the field and, although I suppose
get it.
sometimes it depends where you lose a plane. If you lose it in the beans,
Yeah, I
then
almost did that 3 times this weekend. I
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
"Oh, that's pretty far." Okay.
Then
Matter of fact, it got pretty ugly, and I was the 10-minute plane. I was
all right.
pretty far out in the beans, but I had enough control and I kept just kinda gunning it enough to bring it just out of the beans. I landed it just on the good side of the beans. I was like, "Oh, thank goodness. I might
That can
lose it."
that can. I mean, that's the nice thing with the remote ID is that you
You know
at
where it
least
is.
yeah, you can track it with your phone. You can
Yeah.
see exactly where it is. So I suppose that's one thing, with having the remote ID.
I should probably go
And
do
then
that.
and then also with with the flaps, that can help as well with the takeoff. Apparently it is more useful to have flaps when you're taking off on water than it is on land.
Mm-hmm.
And then landing, like we said earlier, you want to be able to come in, just above the water, still keeping the throttle a little bit, power on the motor, and then because like you said, when the thing is when you drop down, unlike being on land, you're going to come to a pretty abrupt halt, because the
water has more mass.
Yeah, because you can stick to the water like glue.
Mm-hmm.
And that is potential for tipping the plane. If it's a like a Cessna type plane, that's going to potentially tip over.
Yeah, you'll be doing a World War One tip over action pretty quick.
So,
that's and this and like you said, flaps allow you to come in slower, so that differential,
yes,
that speed differential is less, and then you can also land softer.
Yeah, one of the guys told me just half flaps to take off, full flaps to come in to land.
It's good advice.
So that's
awesome.
Yeah, that's about it, really. That's but it's been an interesting experience.
So what's your favorite part about the experience so far? What keeps you coming back? Because clearly you've started this and you were like, okay, this is fun. So obviously there's a community there, which we kind of touched on a little bit. Like the guys that go and do that thing are not the same guys that are at your AMI field, but they clearly have enjoyed this aspect too. What keeps you coming back? Is it the new challenge?
I mean, I've done probably more flying in the last probably 2 months than I ever would have done going to the club, because I guess the club is, like I said, is a little bit further away from compared with the lake. The lake's only about 10-minute drive for me. And really especially with the heat that we've had in these last, 3 or 4 weeks, pretty constant 100-degree plus temperatures. It's just so much more pleasant,
It's a good way to spend your summer, right?
Yeah. Obviously, you're a bit restricted on the type of plane that you can fly. It's got to be a plane. I did think about building, a full size, not a full size, but a scale aircraft carrier. That way I could land the planes, but then I don't think they would probably allow that. But no, so you have to.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you could. It would be impressive to have like a model. I mean, I'm sure somebody's made one, like a scale aircraft carrier.
There's a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you could send that out and then try to land your planes on that, like we're going to try to do at Flight Fest, but instead of in the air, on the water, which
do it on the water like it's supposed to be done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, have a but no, because I mean I've got some warbirds that I want to fly, so obviously when the weather's not as hot, I'll go back up to the club to fly those, and but I think it's just it's probably the challenge of flying off the water was something I wanted to do probably for the last couple of years, so just I never thought I was going to be good enough to fly. I thought it was going to be really difficult, but it's not as difficult as I thought,
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was going to be a far harder thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're keeping the tips you mentioned about taking off and landing pretty in mind, like it's much easier. I found it far more enjoyable. I actually like taking off the water a lot more than I did off land.
And it looks impressive, I think, when you're flying, where you've got floats on. I mean, if you just look at some of the planes that have floats, they look so much better than having wheels on. They just look more impressive.
Yeah. I ended up. Which reminds me, I've got to get back to the Kingfisher. Why am I blanking on the model and make number? But they're on the back end of a lot of battleships in the United States. So they had to get a way to get get mail back and forth, send messages, as well as there would be reconnaissance, and then there would also be target practice. Not that people would be shooting at them specifically, but they'd kind of, that way people would kind of get used to aiming, Um, but yeah, the Kingfisher, OS2U, I think is the designation.
Okay.
I built a model and I have it ready, and I tried to take off on the last day of Builduary, which was one of the windiest, worst days to try and take off. And if I had water to take off from, I think I would have had success. So I may revisit that soon.
Well, I did have an idea the other day when you posted the your Flight Fest episode.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What was that?
And that is to make a Noob Wonder with floats.
I like it. Let's do it.
So not sure how you would do it, but I'll have to think about it.
I mean, just put two pontoons low under the wing.
Yeah, you could do. Yeah.
Like a short standoff to make it so that you could add an extra layer underneath or two underneath the main fuse, so that there's a step and a kind of a gradual kind of boat shape to the front, and then like two little kind of floats to keep it so that it's stable.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm sure it's
a smart way to do it, but we'll have to try. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's do that. We'll figure out a way.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, I really appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate your insight and your experiences that you've had with this float flying that I have yet to really get too deep into, but you're convincing me that it is worth maybe taking a moment to get my rescue boat ready so I can go take a couple of my planes.
Well, hopefully you just have to rescue the plane and not yourself. So
well, yeah, I hope if I have a rescue boat, it will stop me from being tempted to go into the water to go retrieve a boat or to retrieve a plane that went down. So
yeah. No, you don't want to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
here there's. They're all. They have. You can get life jackets. Where we fly, there's a whole rack of life jackets, but people still go in the water without them. Which is crazy.
Well, I mean, if you're swimming, I suppose that makes it much easier.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. But
other than that, you're right.
But
nice.
No, it's been like I said, I've probably flown more often this summer than I did previous summers because if I'm going up to the club, I look at what the temperature is, and if it's going to be in the hundreds, then unless
time to go float flying.
yeah. But that's been really, really enjoyable.
I guess you put an armchair up next to the edge of the lake, put your feet in the water, and start flying.
Well, a lot of guys do. Well, not maybe put their feet in the water, but they take their chairs, the foldable chairs, and because there's picnic tables we can use for benches, which we pretty much take over most of those, and then there's just everybody usually has one of those foldable chairs, and then you fly for a bit, and then have some coffee and just chat about planes for the rest of the day.
That sounds like a good day to me.
Yeah. I think it's more relaxing than flying. Where you're not worried about speed. You're just worried about getting off the water, flying around for a bit, and then getting back down.
Right. The challenge of getting out there and coming back safely. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try to do my best Joe impression. So I hope I do okay. Well, guys, I'm going to take us out. So, guys, as always, thank you for joining us today, listening to this episode about float flying. And very special thanks to our special guest, Richard Joy. Really appreciate you joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, please join our Discord. We have a show comment section. Tell us what you think. You can reach me at Matthew at Aviationrcnoob.com, or you could tell Joe where you at at joe@aviationrcnoob.com, or you could reach both of us and tell us all your thoughts at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. We really appreciate you listening. Joe, Richard, appreciate you coming out tonight and inspiring me to break out my waterproof foam and
Yep.
start building the quack quack. And I can't wait. I wish we lived closer because we'd definitely be flying together out on the lake for sure. So,
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me on.
all right, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
Good. All right.
Bye. I did not prepare a history. I don't know if you have anything that you think might be worth just chatting about for a minute. Like I meant to look up, unfortunately, today was one of those days I thought was going to be easy peasy. And it turned out, my boss was like, hey, I need you to do a couple things. And I went, oh, guess I'm not doing that. I guess I'm not
Yeah.
doing the
Not
history
really.
lookup that I was planning.
I don't.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
I don't think I really have any history. Yeah. So last year was my first EDF. You know,
Oh yeah,
and then
yeah.
this year after coming to Flight Fest.
Yeah, if it
Was in,
weren't for the vegan, I probably wouldn't have ever flown an EDF.
no, yeah, yeah. I mean, after seeing the F-18s at Flight
I
Fest,
know, right?
I was impressed.
It
Yeah,
they make you want to get
yeah.
on it.
So last year was my, I'm sort of like going into different areas of the hobby. So last year was
Right.
EDF. This year is float flying.
Yeah.
Next year may be gliders or something. I'm not sure. Can't really fly gliders around here. I mean, one guy, when I got down there the first time, one guy just had a fishing rod. And,
Right.
I mean, can you imagine trying to bring a plane in with a fishing rod?
That's
You'd have to be
what
really,
did he do?
yeah,
Have like a morning star at the end of it? Like it just sort of spiked his plane. He's like, I got it.
yeah. I think that was the intention. Yeah.
Oh my!
And
Bring a
now,
towel. Right.
yeah.
Bring a towel so you can dry your plane off.
Oh, that's a good point. I haven't done that. Oh, yeah. Okay.